Good afternoon. Back to live streaming. It's been a week and I am back to talk about the Curse of Strahd. So settle back, grab yourself a drink, some food, or whatever you need, or if you need a piece of paper and a pencil or jot down notes, by all means. But this is really designed to be broad in its approach rather than incredibly specific, because we're doing a player guide rather than a dungeon master guide. It's a player guide, which means you can stick around if you are playing in the Curse of Strahd. There won't be any spoilers. Now, normally what I do with my live streams is I will present everything first, and then I will open it up for questions and answers at the end of the live stream, so make sure to stick around for the Q&A at the end. This live stream will go unlisted, so it can't be accessed unless you have subscribed to my channel, hit the bell button, and turned on notifications. Otherwise you won't get prompted that the live stream actually exists. Okay, just to warn you, all of my patrons get access to the live streams that I put forward on YouTube. You will need to wait for the edited version for this live stream, which I do make a version of, and that will be public, but it does not include the Q&A or questions and answers at the end of the live stream. It's very much a cut down version to make it a bit shorter for people who don't like long form content. Okay, so let's have a quick look, see if everybody's sort of ugly weirdo. How's it going? All right, so the sound check's done fine. Look, I'm going to be using slides today. You will see my face at the end of the presentation during the Q&A and at the beginning. That guy, you're running the Curse of Strahd this weekend? Oh, awesome. So this might be a video that you as a dungeon master can get your players to watch so they have a reasonable idea how to prepare themselves. Or at least it'll give you an idea of some of the things they need to be aware of when you're running your session 0. Okay, I think we are all but ready, so let's flick on over and get stuck into this, shall we? Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I'm going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5e. We're going to talk about a specific adventure, and this is a player's guide to the Curse of Strahd. That means if you're playing in the Curse of Strahd, you can stick around because there will not be spoilers in this. This is a very general approach to how to play the Curse of Strahd and prepare you before you go and have a chat with your dungeon master, whoever's running your game. Now, if you're a dungeon master, you might also find this video useful for you because it does spell out some of the major things that a player really needs to be warned of and be aware of when they're playing the game. Because the Curse of Strahd is a very good adventure, but it's not your standard Dungeons & Dragons. And I want to make that clear. When it comes to this being a player's guide to the Curse of Strahd, you might hear a few things that talk about the Curse of Strahd seeming like it's in the negative. But what I'm trying to explain to people is that the Curse of Strahd is not vanilla Dungeons & Dragons. It's not standard Dungeons & Dragons. That means that there is a chance you might find that some players will not find this adventure fun or entertaining, or even something they want to be involved with. And there are a lot of different reasons why that might take place. And I'm going to talk about each one of them very briefly, but hopefully enough detail to give you an idea of what's going on. The first thing is that the adventure is a sandbox. That means you can pretty much go anywhere. You have plenty of options as a player. You will likely be directed and clues dropped by your dungeon master, but you are driving the train, okay? You can go left, right, backward, forward. There are some limitations within the adventure in terms of borders, which you will find out about later on, but it is a sandbox, which means it is entirely possible you could wind up in a location which you're not ready for, and I'm going to talk more about that later. There are lots of horror themes. This is a horror adventure. Okay, that means it's going to be full of twists and turns and surprises and unexpected events and unexpected characters. All of those things make this quite a rich adventure, but need to be warned, there are definitely horror themes. So if you're not the sort of person who likes horror, you may find this more difficult but yes, definitely going to be horror themes. And your Dungeon Master is going to be trying to figure out how to scare you in some way. Most of the combat counters are alright, but something to bear in mind is that the combat encounters are not necessarily fair and balanced, so be warned. Now, the reason being is that you go into a certain location, and some locations will have like a major villain or a major antagonist, and somebody that you have to either negotiate with or deceive, or you might have to actually fight them. There are lots of different options in the adventure. You don't have to necessarily get involved in combat, but it's entirely possible, even as you progress from levels 1 right through to about level 10, you will find some encounters you simply have no chance of winning, or surviving, should I say. And that's one of the things you need to bear in mind, is not fair and balanced. Now, to be honest, I know a lot of people think that's a bad thing, but you've got to remember that the Curse of Strahd is based on the original Ravenloft adventure, and that was built under a different perception of Dungeons and Dragons. The view was not that you were playing a video game where you should always be able to win. Instead, the idea was that in some cases you might have to do something unspeakable, like running away is necessary sometimes. Absolutely, sometimes you should definitely run away. And you might come across a few occasions where you can't run away, and it would have been the better choice to avoid the conflict completely if that was possible to do. Now, I know it sounds like I'm talking about the Curse of Strahd as being a horrible adventure. The reason that Ravenloft and the Curse of Strahd has got such a good reputation is because of these very elements. It gives you lots of choice, but it presents lots of risk as well. So just why I'm pointing those out. The adventure is lethal. It will kill characters unless your Dungeon Master makes a very distinct effort to make encounters or situations easier, or to adjust the encounters. During my own game, I had many character deaths take place, and therefore it's very important that you have a discussion with your Dungeon Master with regard to character death, which is my next point. Make sure your Dungeon Master discusses in your Session 0. Your Session 0 is what happens before you start playing. This is when you're making your character. You should be making your character with a group, not alone, away from everybody else, so that you can build a character that will work with everybody else. But you need to make sure you have a discussion and the Dungeon Master talks about character death and how they will manage character death, because that will impact the game quite a lot. And because it's entirely possible to have a lot of character death take place in this particular adventure, it's something that will crop up often. Now, for those of you who think that character death is the absolute worst thing that can happen in your Dungeons and Dragons game, I can assure you it is not. There are much worse outcomes for your character than character death. There are all sorts of horrible things. And I'm talking about curses and other events and activities that can take place. I don't want to give away too much, but I assure you that the worst thing that can happen to your character is not death. There are other things, and I think your Dungeon Master may well, if they are inclined, they might use a thing called dark gifts. I'm not going to say any more than that, but it's essentially like a curse of some kind, which I've just mentioned, okay? So just bear those in mind, because they can crop up, particularly if you're have a Dungeon Master who likes to sort of shake things up, because they will certainly shake up the adventure. If you are new to Dungeons and Dragons, this is a rough first adventure to play. I always recommend that new Dungeons and Dragons players play through The Lost Mine of Phandelver or some other adventure other than something like The Curse of Strahd. And I've often talked with Dungeon Masters about their desire to run their first adventure being The Curse of Strahd. And I've tried to warn them off from doing that, because there are a lot of different factors taking place in an adventure like this, and it assumes that you are not dealing with new players because of the very nature. Everything that can possibly happen in a Dungeons & Dragons game is likely to happen in the Curse of Strahd. Every eventuality that could ever pop up is likely to occur in this adventure. That's why I say it's not really a great adventure for new players, or even for a new Dungeon Master to run. So if you have a Dungeon Master and this is their first outing and they're running the Curse of Strahd, you need to give them a break, because there's a lot of complexity. It's actually quite a difficult adventure to run, and it will bring up a whole lot of factors and issues that they're not likely to have figured out how to solve straight away. So that's why I don't encourage new players to run through this game. Make sure your character, when you build your character, which you should be doing with the rest of the group, don't do it alone in a room on a computer with nobody else around. Make sure you're with the group when you do this. Make sure it has a strong link with the rest of the party members. It's not good enough to, oh, we met in a tavern and we had a few beers and that was it, and we sort of got to know each other that way. You really need a really strong connection. And one of the things about Dungeons & Dragons is it's a cooperative game, right? That means that teamwork is vital. Absolutely vital in this adventure. So teamwork is vital for your success and to also stop inter-party conflict between your characters, but also between the players. I've found that what tends to happen in a game like this, in the Curse of Strahd, is it can bring up a whole lot of animosity between players if they're not careful, because they don't fully understand what's taking place. There may be many occasions where your Dungeon Master has given a secret message to another player to roleplay their character a particular way, because maybe they're infected with a disease or a curse, or there's something else going on. The Curse of Strahd is very much a horror-themed adventure, which means things like the undead and vampires. So there's all sorts of things that could be taking place. So teamwork vital for success between your players and the characters. Otherwise, it's going to spell doom. And if you aren't used to working as a team, you're going to have to figure it out really fast. Okay, there's lots of things that can go wrong. Do not split the party. And this is one of those adventures where if you show your weakness, there's somebody watching who will pick up on it. And therefore, it can be exploited. And your Dungeon Master will be looking for those moments when you make that foolish attempt to go off on your own. Now, when you watch a horror movie, right, and you see the young woman or whoever it is, a little boy or a man, and they go off away from the party to go and explore something, you always know that something bad's going to happen to them, right? Same sort of thing with the Curse of Strahd. Same sort of principle, so don't split up. Your Dungeon Master is going to be trying to turn your character to the dark side. No, we're not playing Star Wars, but it's essentially what's taking place. Their goal is not so much to test you and challenge you, but to see if they can twist your character from their good alignment or their neutral alignment and make you a villain. So be wary of that. It's important to make sure that when you build a character that it has strong connections of some kind, so they don't wind up making decisions that will take them down a dark route. Now, if you're dealing with players in your group who are used to playing like a murder hobo, that's going to go really badly for them. The chances are that the Dungeon Master will drop a carrot or some breadcrumbs. They'll follow those and they'll get themselves into a lot of trouble and wind up potentially being the main villain's lackey. That's entirely possible. So remember, they're trying to turn your character to the dark side. The adventure can take about 1 year to play through if you play every week for, say, 2 or 3 hours, particularly if you go and explore every single location, and provided that you don't also have too many problems along the way. If you have a lot of sort of character death or maybe some total party kills, that's where every character in the party dies during a combat encounter or whatever encounter it might be, then yeah. So think about things like traps. I mean, Dungeons and Dragons is often full of traps, traps and situations which might be really, really bad for you. Okay. All right. So about a year. There are many twists. Lots of twists. It's a twisted web to untangle. Now, I wouldn't normally say to a player with regard to the Curse of Strahd that you need to keep a notebook of all the things that take place, because I did find that this is one adventure where taking notes is not necessarily absolutely vital. I will say this though, the players at my table who did take notes had a far better idea of what was going on, and I honestly think were more successful and better at driving the story in a positive way towards an outcome that they wanted. So it doesn't hurt to keep a notebook, particularly of the name of NPCs as you are going, just so that you've got some way of discerning what's going on, I mean, who you can trust, who you can't trust. It can be difficult at times to figure out who is the villain and who is a friend or a potential ally. And everybody quite possibly will present themselves as a potential ally, and it will be up to you and your character and how you roleplay them to decide who is the villain and who is the ally or friend. Which is why that notebook is quite useful, provided you actually use one. And you know, you can use your phone. You don't need to necessarily use a pencil and paper. There are lots of ways of taking notes if you want to. Your dungeon master is likely to use fewer combats, and the reason for doing that is not so that it takes away from your fun if you enjoy combat. It's to make the adventure creepier and scarier. Now, the idea behind this is, if you've ever watched the movie Jaws, Jaws is a very frightening movie, and the reason it's so frightening is we don't see the shark. We see the shark much later on, and your dungeon master will likely be doing something very similar. Old style horror movies did the same thing. New modern horror movies don't do that sort of thing. They just like to throw everything in your face, and they go for the jump scare. Now, jump scares aren't very scary. They are just sort of like a surprise, rather than being truly scary and frightening. So be wary that you might find that it takes a little while before you get from one combat encounter to the next one. So just be patient. Don't push it. As I said, there'll be a few occasions where you don't want to be engaged in combat at all, if you can help it. Make sure your adventuring gear is nice and broad and varied. Try to take as much stuff as you can that you think will be useful in the adventure. I recommend grabbing tools that are useful for dealing with undead creatures, because it's a horror, which means undead. Okay, there's going to be plenty of them. So make sure to stock up on all the things you can use against undead. Holy water is a good idea, but even a torch, a normal torch that you can light, would be useful. And also, take some stakes along, some wooden stakes. You can use them for holding down that tent, but you can also use them for shoving into somebody's heart. You know the kind of creature I'm talking about, right? That's that vampire, right? Spell selection is important. You are advised to take damage-dealing spells and utility spells. Cover all of your bases. Don't specialize in one area. That will actually just create problems for you. And there's no reason why you can't select spells that are, particularly when it comes to damage dealing, that are a bit more focused on undead, since you're likely to be dealing with a lot of that already. Now, if your dungeon master doesn't give you a heads up about the adventure you're playing, none of this advice is going to be very useful to you, but hopefully they are giving you at least some idea of what you're going to be playing in. This is an adventure that I would say is more suitable for experienced and skilled players. And experienced and skilled players probably don't need this advice. They will probably already know all of the things I've pointed out. But if you are sort of an intermediate player, not necessarily a beginner, then you might find some of this general advice useful in some way. So that means you need to use good tactics, you need to think things through, you need to make good decisions. Don't go half-cocked, don't go and do things that are too impulsive. By building an impulsive character, the only thing you're going to achieve is disaster and probably character death. Those are the sorts of characters that would not survive in this adventure, okay? Particularly those who rush in and don't think about what they're doing. If you don't like horror movies, if you don't like horror stories or horror books, if you don't like horror adventures, this is not the story for you. Go and play something else, okay? I had one player who started playing in the Curse of Strahd, and out of the whole group, and there were 7 of them, one player said, I want to stop playing. This is not the adventure I really want to be involved in. It's not the style of play that I enjoy. And it's totally all right. If you do not like the idea of being in a horror adventure, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. So don't get worried that other people will think badly of you. It's not for everybody. And I mean, even as a dungeon master, I would not run the Curse of Strahd again, just because I felt quite bad for some of the players when they were playing through, because of some of the things they had to deal with. There are a lot of moral dilemmas in this adventure, things where there doesn't seem to be a choice you can make that's good, where each choice seems to have a bad result. You will be up against the greatest Dungeons and Dragons villain ever created. Strahd is by far the greatest villain that Dungeons and Dragons has, which means he's cunning and clever, and therefore you'll need to have your wits about you. I would say the last thing I want to just quickly say that's really important, and that is, I want you to remember that your dungeon master is still your friend and still on your side when it's all over. It may not feel like that during the gameplay or at the end of the campaign, but sometimes it's very easy to forget, particularly the sorts of things your character will go through, that they are still a friend to you and on your side, just because of the nature of the adventure. Okay, they would have to change so much to tame it down, and it's not that sort of adventure. It's not the sort of adventure that you go and tinker with too much and cool things down. It is designed to be horrific in some nature. It's a horror story. Be prepared for the unexpected. Be prepared to be disgusted and surprised and frightened. Make sure at the end of it that some of the images, if you're finding it difficult, I know that a lot of the players who played at my table, after about 2 or 3 hours, they were quite exhausted because of the tension the adventure builds up in them. So if you get tired, let your dungeon master know. Go have a break, go to the toilet, have a drink, have a rest, have a chat with everybody, and then whenever you're all ready to go back and play again, then go and play again. You might even want to have a talk with your dungeon master about playing for a shorter period of time, just because of the level of fatigue you will suffer while you're playing through the adventure. And I know you might be thinking that sounds ridiculous and I don't believe you, but honestly, it is a fatiguing adventure. It will take a lot out of you. Now, I'm hoping you have found this useful in some way, and if you have, that's great news. I actually have plenty of videos for players if you are interested on how to play the game, tactical advice, how to use adventuring gear, stuff like that you should find useful. If you're a dungeon master, I have a series of videos on the Curse of Strahd, which you might also find useful. Now, if you want to support the channel so I keep making videos like this, I have a Patreon page where you get access to the unlisted live streams, additional content, and priority on the videos I make. I also have affiliate links to the book depository and Amazon down in the description, or doobly-doo. I have a merchandise shelf underneath all of my videos. Make sure to share, like, and subscribe. Hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Okay, I'm not gone. I'm just grabbing a drink of water. and I need to clear my sinuses. Pardon me. The weather keeps changing here in New Zealand, so as a result I'm finding myself having problems with just sort of speaking after a while. Okay, alright, so let's get my face up on the screen and let's have a little chat. Let's have a look and see what we've got in the live chat. I've already said hi to Ugly Weirdo and that guy. Prepared to cook. Hi, how's it going? Prepared to cook. Hi Luke. Bro, honestly, you're the best. Your Strahd videos have helped me so much. Oh, I'm glad, Luke. That's fantastic. I'm hoping that this video, which is designed more for players. Now, if you have questions and you're a player, feel free to ask advice. Okay, so if you're a player playing in the Curse of Strahd, ask your questions, and I'll do my best without giving away spoilers, because I know your Dungeon Master won't like that. But if you have specific questions about building your character and how to go about doing that sort of stuff, I wouldn't normally present that in the video itself, in the body of the video. But if you have some specific questions, I will deal with that. If you're a Dungeon Master and you have questions about the Curse of Strahd, that would reveal spoilers. I don't want you to ask me questions specifically if you're a Dungeon Master about the Curse of Strahd today. Let's leave that for another day. But if you have questions about Dungeon Mastering in general that would not give away spoilers about the Curse of Strahd, I will absolutely answer those questions as best I can. Okay. Pearsham, how's it going? Don't forget to lick the smash button. Lick, yep, that's right. Make sure to lick that button. No, I think you mean like. Thank you, Pearsham. Yes, hit the like button. It is a spooky adventure, particularly if your Dungeon Master does a good job of it, and they'll be going for everything. I know Dungeon Masters have used music, lighting. I have advised Dungeon Masters to speak very slowly. No plot armor back in the day. Well, you know, it's not so much plot armor. I mean, I don't like the idea of players having to replace their characters often. And in my adventure, for those of you who don't know, my players had many character deaths, okay? And many things happened to their characters that was terrible. But they still kept playing the same character. I would just find a way for them to continue. And a lot of them would wind up stacking up all sorts of problems they had to deal with. But I allowed them a way of dealing with those issues. Okay, I don't know how your Dungeon Master is going to do it, but there was no way I was going to have a rolling roster of characters getting chewed up in this adventure. And I know for some people that sounds like, well, you know, where's the threat? Trust me, I found ways of making character death seem tame in comparison to all the other things that could take place. And if your Dungeon Master does a really good job, they'll wind up doing exactly the same sort of thing. Hi Joe, how's it going? Now, what's this? Tahari? Is it Tahari Withers? Hey man, your videos, if I got your name wrong, I do apologise. Your videos on the Curse of Strahd have been helping me a ton. I'm looking to run it relatively soon, and the book has kind of confused me a bit in a way. Look, the adventure has so much packed into it. If you're a Dungeon Master and you're running that adventure, it's got a lot packed into it. So yes, it will be confusing, which is why I do these videos. You are welcome, and I will keep doing them. They won't be at a speed that necessarily people would prefer. If you're running the adventure right now, you know, don't expect me to be able to pump out a video on every topic you might like, because that's not going to happen. But I will try to do one roughly about once a month, because there's other topics that need to be talked about. And although I'm very keen on talking about the Curse of Strahd, I don't really want to talk about it too much. I'm really quite serious when I say I would never run the Curse of Strahd again for a group of players. I know there are some Dungeon Masters who could do that, but for me, I want something else. It's like eating old pizza, and I wouldn't want to do that to my players again. Because, you know, I had a debriefing at the end of the Curse of Strahd once I had run it with my players to make sure that I had not damaged my relationship with them because of some of the things that took place. Pesham, Fred is the man. Well, thank you very much. Player versus player. See, there was one of the things. See, during my session 0, I explained to my players, I don't want you to be involved in player versus player combat. I don't want you to get into a fight with each other. The only time that could ever be acceptable is if the Dungeon Master was evil enough to have something take place to your with your character, which meant you didn't have total control over it, but the other players don't know that. And I said that was totally a possibility. So that can happen. And you know, and I did sort of mention the concept of curses, and there are lots of different ways that can look. Time to drink. Yes, it is time to drink. It's time to drink quite a lot, actually. David Burns. Hi, how's it going, David Burns? John Buckingham's here. Love the suggestions to don't split the party. I would imagine it's even more important in this adventure. Yes, it is. Absolutely. I mean, usually the advice is don't split the party. But, you know, to be honest, there are certain times in a Dungeons & Dragons adventure when you're not in a dangerous location where splitting the party is all right. If you're in town, you know, and you're just collecting information, splitting the party is not a big deal. That's in a normal adventure. But if you're in a dungeon, splitting the party where there's dangers and monsters, splitting the party is a bad idea. Unfortunately for the Curse of Strahd, there's no time where you are not under risk. And as a result, splitting the party is always going to create problems because there's no telling what has taken place once that character has moved away from the party. And who knows what secret messages your Dungeon Master is sending to that player who's playing that character that you don't know about. And I certainly used secret messages, and I imagine your Dungeon Master will do the same sort of thing. Epic Donut 1109. Hey Fred, hey, thank you very much. Great video. That can wait to show me my... you can't wait to show your players? Oh, good. So, did I get it right? Did I provide them with enough information without giving away the important sort of story elements or spoilers? I felt like I did. I didn't even talk about the background, the haunted one. Because, I mean... it's in the back of the adventure, but as a Dungeon Master, you might not even... you could use that and say, this is an option if you want. But you could also say, I'm not going to present that as a background to my players. It's a shame because I kind of feel like it does sort of make the game feel a little bit more Curse of Strahd. But when I was running my campaign, my players all decided to have a very, very similar background. And, you know, it was important that they had the same quest goal. And I think the quest goal that I gave them was, you are hunting werewolves that have been either eating or capturing children. Go and find them. Something like that. And that sort of helped them bind themselves together. But they had a good discussion amongst themselves about how to actually construct their party. My first session with the Death House was great. Thanks in part to you. Thank you very much. Oh, good news. Could you elaborate more on how to deal with character death for the Curse of Strahd? Okay, Epic Donut 1109. I don't want to go into a lot of detail in this video because I already made a video on that. It's actually called... I think it's Character Death and Dark Gifts in the Curse of Strahd or something like that. So part of my playlist for the Curse of Strahd actually talks about managing character death and dark gifts and curses and stuff like that. Okay? And that's the video you want to go and check out. And I think I've done at least one video on options for dealing with character death rather than just build a new character. I've done at least, I think it's 3 different videos on the total party kill, like what they are, why they happen and how to manage them. And it's not about, those videos don't talk about the way you should do it. Okay? They just give you options, because I couldn't care less how you do it. As long as you have options and you feel like you can solve the problems yourself and you don't have to go and ask somebody else. Okay, Kenny Cole. This is my first live with you. I am new DM, okay, and I use your Lost Mine of Phandelver and Dragon of Icespire Peak videos currently. Please never stop. Well, I've got a new job, and I'm hoping that my job schedule will not interfere with my ability to keep making videos. The one thing I have discovered is that I'm probably going to be down to making 1 or maybe, if I'm lucky, 2 videos per week. There will no longer be like a video every day or a video every 2 days or something like that. I just can't keep up with that. So I'm going to do what all of the other major D&D channels tend to do, which is put out one piece of content and try to make that as the best content I can, and try to make it something that you are interested in and I am interested in, so that I can talk from a point of experience, and you can tell that I am enthusiastic about the topic rather than pretending. You know, I could always do the, oh, hi, welcome to HowtoDandD, my name is, and you know it was completely fake, right? So, and then keep going with that sort of thing, with the high-pitched voice and the explosive energy and so forth. But, yeah, trying to make it as down-to-earth and as useful to you, but still entertaining and engaging for me, so I'm getting something out of it as well. And I made a player guide for the Lost Mine of Phandelver, which I think was actually a good move. I wish I had made a Curse of Strahd player guide sooner. There is another person who made a player guide for the Curse of Strahd, but for the life of me, I cannot remember the name of the channel. I know it's out there somewhere. Type in player guide Curse of Strahd and it should come up, if you want to go and check out that video as well. Yes, time to drink. Prepare to cook and survive. Whoa, spoiler alert with the what? Clicked off guys, have a good one right night. Did I give away a spoiler? Hopefully I didn't. Yeah, I'm trying not to, I'm trying to stay away from the spoilers, okay? Try to stick with general questions about dungeon mastering and questions if you are a player playing the game of Curse of Strahd. David, what do you got here? I try to tell my players, you may do as you wish when you play. Absolutely, and they should always feel like they have the final choice, and they do have the final choice. But this world is live, and if you don't think, your character will die, and I won't help you. So there's nothing wrong with approaching it that way. For me, I guess over time, I view Dungeons and Dragons less as a game of skill and more of a game of chance, and more of a game of gambling, where they don't really know. Things can go badly, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the dungeon master, has nothing to do with the players, can have everything to do with the dice, and everything to do with the setup for the adventure. And these might be things that, for whatever reason, have happened that way, and there's, you know, unless you do a lot of fiddling around and fudging, you can't really control that sort of stuff. I don't think that Dungeons and Dragons needs that level of control. So yeah, my view of Dungeons and Dragons is, I don't view Dungeons and Dragons like a game of chess. I know there's a lot of people who do still view, you know, they stopped playing chess because they got bored and they decided to go and play Dungeons and Dragons, and that, you know, and they break it down and they're mechanical about it, and, you know, there should be formulas for making sure all encounters are equal and balanced, and it's just, yeah, that's not really how my approach anymore. It used to work that way, but not anymore. All right, Persham. Thank you, Kenny. Thank you very much. Joe, hey Fred, I'm currently making my first mini from green stuff. Oh, really? It's a Lokathan race. Is that the elephant person? The elephant humanoid? It's a catfish type humanoid. Oh, I've never heard of it before. Sounds awesome. You've got to send me some pictures, Joe. You've got to send me some pictures so I can see it. When you finish, that is. Epic Donut. So how often do you check to make sure your PCs are eating? I tend to forget to make them buy and use rations. I was wondering how much I should emphasize that. Is there a player in the party playing a character who likes hunting and fishing and collecting and gathering stuff? If that's not what they find exciting and interesting, then I wouldn't focus on it. For me, I don't worry so much about rations when they say, I want to go hunting and I've got a bow, I'm going to go and shoot something and then we're going to eat it and cook it. I'm like, fine. You know, this is the sort of location you're in. These are the sorts of things you are likely to come up with. And I will quickly jot down sort of a few options. And then from there, I'll get them to sort of roll a dice, make a survival check. They might give me some instructions about what they do. They might want to set up a trap and so forth, and that's fine. But I only really focus a lot on those sorts of things if there are people who are interested. If they don't care about that sort of stuff, go with something else. My way of dungeon mastering is more like an action movie. So I tend to move quite fast. My combats take between 5 and 10 minutes now. I know that sounds ridiculous, but trust me, they do. And if you understood what I'm doing with the combat itself and how initiative is run and how I run the game, I don't do it the standard traditional way. So therefore, everything happens really fast. And I found my players enjoy that. There are usually maybe 1 or 2 people who have a real problem getting over that particular change in how I run combat. But I would prefer to have, 2, 3, 4 combats in a game session than one really long combat and a whole lot of role play. That's just my way of approaching things. And if you are interested in that approach, I did a video called Group Initiative. Okay, what else we got here? So hopefully that answered your question, Epic Donut. Hi Fred, how's it going? When players choose the other DM's game. Had a situation at the local game store, 2 games running. Most of the players went to the one game. 2 DMs, 11 players at one table. Yeah, that can happen sometimes. DM short on players is offended. Yeah, well, players will do that sometimes. If they know a particular dungeon master operates a particular way and they have a choice between the 2 of them, particularly in a public environment, that can happen. But usually in a game store, if they're running Adventurers League, if it's managed correctly, you're not allowed to have more than 7 players at your table. Now, I know this doesn't happen. I know as a fact, as a general rule, that dungeon masters can wind up with 10 players, 11 players, 13 players, even in Dungeons & Dragons Adventurers League, even when they shouldn't, okay? The only reason that's being allowed to happen is because one of those dungeon masters is allowing it. If there's another dungeon master and you've got 11 people at your table, you need to say, look, there are other spaces at that table. You need to go onto that table. The first people to sit down, the first 7 to sit down at my table, those are the people who play at my table. That's what I used to do, okay? When I showed up and I started setting up and the players were coming in, the first 7 players to sit down at my table were playing at my table. And everybody else had to go to the other dungeon masters. And that was that. Whether they would prefer to play with me or not. That's just how it works. And that's down to the game store ensuring that happens and the dungeon masters. You have control if you are running the game. Ben, I'm losing my voice. Ben, here we go. I love your Russian accent. Ha ha. Yeah, it's brought on by losing my voice as I speak for far too long. Love your channel. Thank you very much. Love the short vids on the mechanics of the game. I'm glad you enjoy them. I know, Ben, that a lot of people want me to continue making short videos on game mechanics, but as I've said before, I have already made the bulk of the short mechanical videos. And I started making short mechanical videos on some of the class features. You know, I'll just do one class feature for a wizard or a warlock or whatever and make just a shortish video for that. But they're not very popular because they are broken down and they're so simple. Okay, whereas the generic stuff is a bit more useful. So that means that now that I've done all of those short mechanical videos, a lot of the stuff I talk about takes a lot longer. It can't be done in 2 or 3 minutes. Although I'm sure there's a few people who've told me that I don't know what I'm talking about. But if they can find somebody who can do it, it's not my channel, good for you. But now, yeah, a lot of my content is a bit more complicated, a bit more involved. There's a little bit more philosophy involved and a little bit more options. So that means that even my player guides, you know, particularly right now I've been doing the adventuring gear, you know, how to use your adventuring gear, different pieces of adventuring gear in your game. And I will do a lot of research, so I give you as many options as possible so that, you know, if a situation arises, you know what to do with a bar of soap other than wash yourself, or how you can use your piece of rope, so that you're not just looking at your character sheet and then what spells do I have and what skills do I have and what class features or race features do I have. All right, my water's almost gone, and I need to get through this really quickly because I know that this is Critical Role night. So in about, 13 minutes, it's Critical Role time. So you'll all be jumping over to Twitch TV. So let's get this finished. And what else what else do I need to comment on? Okay, I'm a little bit rusty here. Okay. If there is no reason to suspect they are short on food, we don't bother. Fair enough. Would you be willing to make a Horde of the Dragon Queen player guide? David? Yes, I'm willing to make a Horde of the Dragon Queen player guide, David. That's not a bad idea. I really struggled making the Dungeon Master guides because I despise the adventure so much. But to be honest, even though as a Dungeon Master I hated the adventure, my players loved it. So yes, I would consider doing that. I'll start thinking about it. It's a good idea. So yes, I will do it, David. Fred, at 8, the one with the most players was trying to send players to the other table. Players said, nope, not going to that one. Well, then don't play. Don't play. Show up, you don't play. You've got to show up on time before everybody else, before you lose the option to play. I have a lot of sympathy for Dungeon Masters who play in public games because it's a very, very hard environment to run a game. And I ran a lot of those games because I wanted people to be able to play. I wanted new people to play. I wanted experienced people to play. I wanted them to be able to have their game. Because they were struggling to find people. You know, Dungeons and Dragons has been underground for so long, it was hard to find everybody, right? Now everything's just coming out of the woodwork. You can use social media, there's platforms, you can find Dungeon Masters, you can find players, and all that sort of thing. You know, so it's a lot easier than it was like 5 years ago. I know it was a lot harder in New Zealand 5 years ago. Okay, what else we got here? Epic Donut. A friend of mine who's never played D&D before wants to give a shot this weekend. Okay, any tips to help fresh players get comfortable with the game? Yeah, give them a cheat sheet. Give them a breakdown, something they can just quickly look at on the things they can do in combat. And because that's the hardest element of the game. Everything else is a dice roll, you know. and say to them, look, don't worry about making mistakes. Okay, I already know you're going to make mistakes. I know you're going to get confused at times. Ask questions and just deal with it from there. That's my advice to you. Okay, I always try to be gentle on new players because I want them to keep coming back. I make my games for experienced players are much more difficult to engage with because they expect a lot more of them. Butts, how's it going, Butts? I killed a player last night. No, you did not. Butts, you did not kill a player. You killed a character. Okay? Dungeon Masters don't kill players, they only kill characters. I'm DMing. How do you suggest handling PC death during the Curse of Strahd? As I said, Butts, I made a video called Dark Gifts and Character Death for Curse of Strahd. It's a Dungeon Master guide and it spells out everything that you would need. My suggestion to you is don't have them create a new character. Have them play the same character, just have them come back in a unusual way. I had my characters come back as ghosts. They wound up in the bodies of Barovian individuals, all that sort of stuff. So I did all sorts of wacky things. And that's just the tame stuff that I presented. So yeah, check out that video. I ended up having a PC meet a mysterious entity that gave him a second chance, but left him with a new trait. Butts, perfect. Great. And the great thing is too, is the player gets to keep playing that character. And one of the things that I think a lot of people forget with regard to the traditional hero, the story of the traditional hero is going through some sort of traumatic experience, and often the result is death and rising from the ashes, a bit like the phoenix. But, it's being swallowed by the belly of the beast and then having to come up from that. So use those tropes. They're really useful in the Curse of Strahd. That is a perfectly acceptable way to deal with it, especially in the Curse of Strahd. Yes, Fred, you're absolutely right. I'm not talking to myself. I'm talking to Fred Hubber, by the way, for those of you who are confused. 1 hour to critical role, okay. But it seems ridiculous to have a dark power try to save each player if they die. You don't have to use just dark gifts, okay? And that's why I started talking briefly about curses. If you watch the video that I did, I do talk about other things. If you've got, it's entirely possible that a character could wind up contracting the curse of the werewolf, or getting bitten by a vampire and having to going through that process of transforming into a full-fledged vampire, which might mean the rest of the party have to do something to save them. That's like perfect. That's horror. Those are the sorts of stories that come out of Dracula and a lot of the horror stories we're used to. Okay, so use every option you can possibly think of. And I know you're thinking, well, but dark gifts, I don't want to use them all the time. You don't have to, okay? That is just one option. Fred Hubbard. Curse of Strahd is a strange situation, and since this is a player guide, can't go into it anymore. That's right. It's absolutely, yeah. Just as I said in the guide with regard to players, there are worse things that can happen to your character than your character dying. So as a dungeon master, be creative. Okay. That's the best way to deal with it. Okay, I think that is a good place to stop. I've run out of water, and I think I've talked myself silly. I see that nobody has given me a thumbs up, so obviously I didn't do a very good job. At least I didn't get a thumbs down. I guess that's a good sign. But yes, I think this is a good time to stop. I will be back. I should be back tomorrow. I'll be painting tomorrow. I've got some undead creatures I'm going to paint. I think they're ghosts or skeletons or something like that. I should be painting tomorrow. Otherwise, you'll see me in a week's time. And the edited version for this live stream will eventually get released once I get a chance to actually do that. Okay, so we are done. So wherever you are in the world, whether it's the morning, afternoon, night, early morning, look after your family and your friends and yourself and the players you play with and your dungeon master. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.